Hey guys, welcome back to Ancient Amnesia Podcast. This is Josh, and I'm back with a part 2 of our recent chat on ancient giants. For more videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and stay updated on all our podcast releases. We hope you enjoy the show today, and we'll see you soon. Pathway at some point. And, you know, it's like when we look at our hominid kind of videos that we do in our podcast, we talk about that at a certain period in the Pleistocene, you had about 4 or 5 different, hominid creatures living at the same time. You had your Cro-Magnons, you had your Neanderthals, you had your Denisovans, right?
Mm-hmm.
You had others that we have yet to discover. So this idea that it was just Homo sapiens.
You even have hobbits. They found hobbits.
Yeah, they found all these. So that's one thing
in New Guinea.
that's one thing to put in perspective when we're thinking about this, because we want to ground this in as much logic as we can, and the data is out there. We have found different types of hominids that were modern in living in the same kind of 200, 300, 400,000 year period as we were all developing and kind of fighting for dominance. And so there's no reason to think that there were areas where there was isolation and there was this ability for these particular pathways to kind of like advance out. So that's one thing I like to think about whenever I at least kind of start asking those questions, is that what do we have in the fossil record? What does the anthropological things and records have to say about this? So there's a couple quotes here that are pretty good. Evidence for the occupation of this region before the appearance of the red man and white race is to be found in almost every part of the county, as well as through the northwest generally, in removing the gravel bluffs, which are numerous and deep, for the construction and repair of roads, and in excavating cellars. Hundreds of human skeletons, some of them giant form, have been found. A citizen of Marion County estimates that there were as many human skeletons in the knolls of Marion County as there were white inhabitants in the world at the time. This is an account in Ohio in 1883. So this isn't an anomaly. This isn't something that's like one guy. This is
no fake news there, man. That's the real deal.
Right. And so again, the reiteration that this is thousands of these things. This isn't, they found 5 guys. And if you listen to some of these accounts, they even knew at the time this is very early 1900s, late.
These are all from like 1850 something.
Yeah, but this is what happened. Americans came, they colonized. It took them a while to get in, settle in, start digging around. You start to develop your own land, you start digging around. I mean, I have land in Texas, and I found all these crystals as I started kind of like looking around. And my family had been there since in the 90s, and they didn't never find one because they weren't looking. But you go around and you start tilling the earth and making fields and building barns and stuff, and they started hitting their shovels on all kinds of things. What's happening is that, you have to understand the scene. People go, oh, well, we would know. Well, I mean, these guys in the 1800s, you're not so concerned. You're trying to like live life and settle on land, not get killed by Indians, and farm and make sure that your third child actually lives to be 15.
Yeah, to be 40.
There's all of these things that you have to worry about. You find some giant skeleton, it's pretty interesting, but you're not thinking like you are today, sitting drinking your coffee going, wow, and contemplating the universe like we have time to do nowadays. We didn't have time to do that.
A lot of them people read the Bible, and I would imagine that a lot of them had read Genesis and read about the giants or the Nephilim or the Shining Ones, and they were very pious people. The original, you didn't have a lot of atheists, that built this country. You had a lot of people that were very pious and very religious. And, if they found a giant or a giant skeleton, they would assume that, well, this is what the Bible talked about. It verifies what I've read. It verifies what my pastors told me and the little bit that I've read and the interpretations I've done. And I'm just going to bury it, cover it back up out of respect. I'm not going to put it on it. And there was a few that did sideshows and, in Jim and Hugh's book and, stuff like that. There's stories about that. But yeah, I think a lot of times these guys were so pious and religious that it just immediately clicked with them that I need to just cover this up. This isn't right.
Yeah. And I've told my grandparents who are, pretty religious, and they found a bunch of giants in North America and, the eastern coast and along the Mississippi Valley. And just like, oh, well, that's amazing. Well, there was giants back in those days, so they don't, to them, that's not out there, and
it's not a surprise when you find that. Yeah.
Right. And so you would think that when these people were actually, pulling these things up out of the ground, they were just like more amazed, like, oh my God, we found one of the biblical giants, or we found, something that just validates what we already believe.
Right.
So yeah, they're not going to take this as some, aliens landed type information that people may think they would. But again, there's just so much evidence that we have to, when you have like the 12th annual report of the Bureau of Ethnology to the Secretary of the Smithsonian Institution, making comments like, underneath the layer of shells, the earth was very dark and appeared to be mixed with vegetable mold to the depth of 1 foot. At the bottom of this, resting on the original surface of the ground, was a very large skeleton lying horizontally at full length. Although very soft, the bones were sufficiently distinct to allow careful measurement before attempting to remove them. The length from the base of the skull to the bones and toes was found to be 7 foot 3 inches. It is probable, therefore, that this individual, when living, was fully 7.5 feet. At the head lay some small pieces of mica and a green substance, probably oxide of copper, though no ornament or article of copper was discovered. So that ain't no town hall record.
No. And that's, funny thing is that's the Smithsonian, who now have been, accused by many of covering all this up. Right.
And what I find is interesting is that these things were so old that they just crumbled. And you hear that when you are talking about skeletons, if they can survive long enough to be found like that, then and they crumble to dust, that means that these things are pretty old.
Bone crumbles at like 250 to 400,000 years. It's it can be found in situ, as long as it isn't touched or anything. But those glaciers, they came down and covered a lot of the United States, during that period, just whenever the ice age occurred, it was just glaciated, and whatever was left of those bones that was probably at that point, 12,000 years ago or whatever it might have been, they were identifiable, but now they're just smashed pieces and flakes and that's what I think a lot of what we've lost is everything's just pulverized by glaciers and pulverized by cataclysms.
It's saying here another report where they found the Bureau agents found a length that was 8 feet. It was clearly traceable, but crumbled to pieces immediately after removal from the hard earth, which is encased. So, and this is common. You see these guys kind of talking about how it just turned to dust. There's also research talking about how these things had swords and shields, and this is kind of what's, to me, fascinating, because if there's weaponry and if there's like writing that's found, if there's
in time that
then that means this is not a Native American type civilization. This is something that obviously would be part of the Bronze Age, or it could have been even more recent, who knows, but or there could be European colonization that came over at some point, were the Romans here, were the Egyptians here?
The Mayans used shields and swords and spears, and so did some of the Indian tribes. They did that too. So it's possible they existed right up until the point of where they became Indians.
Right. Well, awesome. Well, we guys hope you enjoyed this kind of short show on giants. I hope we brought some new information to the table. It's something that we're going to keep covering because it's really popular and fascinating, and for good reason. I mean, we should look at the world a little bit more imaginatively, I think.